time for the Mayo Jam.
Hi everyone. Greetings of the new year from the entire podcast team. I'm Pooja Kothari from the batch of 1994. I really hope lots more of you will come forward with suggestions on topics that you'd like to listen to on our podcast. Reach out to us if you have a topic that you would want a discussion on, or you would like to suggest the name of another batchmate that we should feature on the podcast. The easiest way to reach us is by email, mayocollegegirlsalumni@gmail.com, to send in your suggestions. And today I'm interviewing Charu Sharma from the batch of 1974. Of course, you all already know him as a sports commentator and television personality. But I'm not sure how many of us knew that he's a Mayo alum, or that his father, Mr. N.C. Sharma, was the vice principal of Mayo College. Charu and his brothers are constructing a beautiful lecture hall on the school campus in his father's memory. Here's a trip down memory lane with Charu Sharma. Hi, Charu. Welcome to the Mayo Jam Podcast. We're very happy to have you here and talking about Mayo.
Well, thank you, Pooja. What a pleasure, what a delight. Especially talking about Mayo. I mean, whatever time frame you have, let me assure you it's going to be inadequate. Always delighted to be talking about Mayo. And I'm so glad that you picked up the whole girls, the Mayo Girls Old Students Society, whatever the official term right now is, because we need somebody to really push that forward and integrate a lot more.
You just saved yourself from a whole lot of trouble. There are no old girls, by the way.
I beg your pardon. You're so right. That's why I kind of hesitated, got myself into a bit of a tangle. But
so we call ourselves
the alumni.
Call ourselves the Mayo Girls Alumni Association, but we're very happy with you being the Old Boys Society.
Well, yeah, but you can say old boys, old we'll take, and so too boys, because boys, as you know, will always be boys, but the girls grow up and become alumni.
Yes, we do. So let me start right at the beginning. Which years did you spend at Mayo?
Well, in many ways, because my father was teaching at Mayo. I was actually born at Mayo. So you're talking about somebody who spent many, many years there. In fact, 15, because I was literally born, not in the school, but in Ajmer. But I could join only when Mayo was open, which at that point of time was class 5. And we had all these funny numbers for classes, but class 5 to make it easy for everybody else. And that was 1968, the autumn term, as we call it. There was a spring term and autumn term. So it was July 1968 that I was formally admitted into the school rolls.
And then graduated in 1974.
Correct. December 74. So I was the ISC batch of 74. And some, of course, from our batch graduated a little later in March who were doing higher secondary. But we were a fine bunch of 110. And most of us are still fairly well networked, which is wonderful, isn't it?
Oh, that's fantastic. You're still in touch with a lot of your batchmates, is it?
A lot. And I don't know why I take my Mayo alumni ship a lot more seriously than perhaps many others, because I don't know, maybe there's so much more to connect me to Mayo, and I truly had a wonderful time there. That at times I'm a little unfairly upset that some are not as closely connected, and I say, well, why not? But to each their own. I mean, not everybody has the same level or same kind of experience, the same width and depth of experience at Mayo.
I can imagine that, because every school for every student is actually a different experience, and more so if it's a residential school. So tell us a bit more about your Mayo days. What sport did you play at Mayo?
Well, it'll be, if I was to encapsulate that, then I didn't have a moment free, which is how these boarding schools ought to be anyway, because from early morning when you get up for physical training or PT till late in the evening when you kind of really drop onto bed, it's just one fabulous marathon day after day. So I was not obviously, I suppose, but I was very drawn towards the world of sport. And Mayo, as you know, offers so much. So I played everything very gladly. I'm afraid I wasn't equally should be as enthusiastic about academics, but one got by. And I also had to do science. Had to, because my father actually taught math. So he couldn't fathom the fact that his children would not do math and science, which was a bit of a drag for me. I'll tell you why. I mean, not that I say this myself, so, please forgive me, my immodesty, but not that I couldn't grasp enough. I was always very quick to grasp everything. But then one has to practice,
Yeah.
in terms
Yeah.
of math and other physics, chem, you have to practice so much. And I didn't have the time because what I was practicing was a lot more in the world of sport. So, you can't do everything, can you? I was also very deeply into music. I used to play the sitar,
Oh,
play all
wow.
sorts of sports. So I was very, very deeply involved with everything that Mayo offered. Unfortunately, I'll have to say this, that not hugely academically inclined. I hope you won't make me repeat this again and again.
No, I was going to ask you, were you the naughty, sporty, or the geeky Mayo?
Well, definitely not geeky,
Yeah.
but a mix of, 80% sporty, 20% naughty. I think I'll take that. But of course, because Mayo, and I might as well say this very quickly because, to expand on my sporting connection, because Mayo was one of the few schools that actually had a decent pool, 25-meter pool. Now, of course, that's not adequate. Everybody needs a 50-meter pool to get going competitively. But Mayo had a 25-meter pool and diving boards and a diving tradition. So I just got pulled into that willy-nilly. I mean, I could have gotten pulled deeper into any sport, I suppose, because if I may be modest, I was kind of, very happy to play anything and everything to a reasonable level. But we got pulled into the world of aquatics, which is a wider world of swimming and diving and water polo are the three normal sports associated with aquatics when you use that term. So I started with swimming and diving because there was not much water polo when we were that small. And very soon, after the age of, I think, 12, swimming kind of fell away a bit. Maybe one had to work really hard at swimming, so diving was a lot easier in terms of the hard work that one put in. And from a very early age, therefore, from 1968 onwards, one was sort of diving at what was then called a national level, even though that was an age group level. And then there were these nationals that I was sent for, which was the main, the Indian National Championship from 1970 onwards, when I had just turned 11 about a month before, and I won the junior national diving gold. And then I kept that going for 6 years in a row. So as you can imagine, a lot of my life got pulled into a lot of diving practice, because when you excel at something that early, obviously you spend a lot of time on it. And while I'm very happy to have done whatever I did in the world of diving, it obviously took me away from as much time as I spent on diving. I couldn't spend the same amount of time on other sports, and I have no regrets. But who knows, if I'd played some other sport that had potential to play longer, it might have served my sporting career better. But no regrets, because even cricket for that matter, or many other sports, we're all the same in the very late 60s, early 70s. There wasn't that much differentiation. So anyway, my early life was all about diving.
And I thought with your height, you would have been pulled into the basketball team. Did you play any basketball at all?
I did, not so much at Mayo, but much later. I played for college. So, because I must confess, and a lot of my batchmates and even my brothers and others were all kind of a little shocked, I hope pleasantly, because most of my height, was gained after school. So, so I wasn't particularly tall in school. There are still memories that, my batchmates have saying, what the hell happened to you? So I grew, the length came later, but I was still diving then. And I was easily India's tallest diver, which is no fun, because diving is really for very short, very, muscular gymnastic kind of people, which I was till I was in school. But, the length is not a credit to you when you're diving. It's actually, a liability. So,
I'll take your word for it. I am terrified. I wouldn't go near a diving board. So I would take your word for it. But I believe you represented India at the international level as well.
Pooja, I think it's a shade incorrect. The truth is, I could have. I suppose I'd have stayed with it. But the best I did was, after leaving Mayo, I actually continued in St. Stephen's, and that's why they actually admitted me there, because of my diving excellence, I suppose. And I, being the top 3 divers in the country for quite a while, I actually spent a lot of time in Patiala while I was at college, because all these national camps are all held there. Didn't have too many other campuses. And there was a qualification mark, if to give you a little detail, the 6th place of the previous meet was the qualification mark of the next meet. And at that point of time, we were all practicing for the Commonwealth Games. So there were 4 of us who were shortlisted. We spent quite a bit of time in Patiala. And I actually made the qualifying grade for the Commonwealth that year in Edmonton, Canada. But it's a very long story. And, one guy did go from the services who was perhaps a shade better than me. But they said, well, you made the qualifying. We'll give you the entry. We'll get you your accreditation and everything else. But you'll have to pay some amount because those days, the federations, even now, a lot of federations are not very well off at all. But those days were penniless. And I was equally penniless. So there's no way I would have paid my fare to Edmonton, Canada and back, which was the farthest point from India, almost. So I actually didn't go. And then I retired very soon thereafter. I went to the US and I dived for that college as well, Davidson in North Carolina. And not many people may know Davidson, but after Steph Curry did so well in the world of basketball, that's his college too. So I'm kind of now, hey, by the way, I'm from Steph Curry's college.
Oh,
so,
wow.
There we go.
Yeah, I did not know that.
Right. So I dived there as well, and I made all conference and this, that, and the other. But I was only there for a short while a year, on an international scholarship.
I would never have guessed that you started out in diving as a sport. I mean, cricket and diving, my everlasting memory of you is on the cricket field with Mandira baby and the noodle straps, if I remember correctly.
Well, those are many lovely stories. But like I said, if I start getting to a storytelling session here, we'll be through, having breakfast tomorrow, 12 hours later. But yeah, that's the world of commentary. And of course, I did play many other sports to a reasonable level after I retired from diving at the ripe old age of 19 or 20, because, where could it have taken me? Because the people, when I came back from the US, of course, I would have either had to join the services or the police or the railways or, become a professional diver. No way. So I said, okay, enough. And I joined a corporate career where luckily I was allowed a lot of sporting outlets, should we say, because of the clubs and things. So my sporting connections continued very strongly, but I couldn't continue professional sport.
So tell me, given how good you are at storytelling, tell me a Mayo story which you haven't yet told or shared with the world.
Well, I was pretty young then. I can't even remember whether I actually joined Mayo. Then maybe just a shade before, maybe 67 or whatever, or 66. And, the Mayo tennis courts, oh gosh, how do we expunge this? We can't, can we? But anyway, so the tennis courts had a kind of a bamboo backing, not a wall. The lattice work bamboo, all the way through the courts. The courts were about the same. And I and a friend of mine were just sort of being a little, well, you said it, naughty. And we just collected a few leaves and we thought we have ourselves a little fire. We got a little match and stuck it to the leaves and they caught fire. And we said, oh, wow, great, we lit a fire. And then very soon it transferred itself to the bamboo lattice work, which, by the way, was painted black with what? Tar.
Oh,
so it just kind of took off. It was pretty terrifying. Somebody noticed, of course, and came running and put it off, and it became a biggish thing, at least in the family. And then I got soundly kind of reprimanded. Although, mind you, whoever came, I said sorry, because I'd been taught that if you say sorry, it's going to be okay. So I said sorry. It didn't quite work too much because I was a little annoyed even. I said, but I've said sorry. So what's the big deal? Yeah. The big deal was a lot of it burnt down and had to be built again. But it was only bamboo, by the way. It wasn't like some expensive,
But you left your mark on Mayo.
Oh, yeah. I left a burn mark. By the way, the 1974 batch, because there's some kind of connection here, maybe a karmic connection, has actually, all of us, when we got together for our 25th many moons ago, we said, well, we must all do something with the school. So it's become quite a bit of a tradition now, and many batches do many things. But we were, in many ways, possibly one of the first, if I can say so, to have a corpus built up.
I see.
There's a lovely stone pavilion on one end of the tennis courts. So the court number 1, a sort of a viewing pavilion, very nicely done with old traditional heritage kind of building, because the one who designed it and built it is also the architect from our batch, Abhimanyu Dalal. A wonderful person, of course, now also in charge of so many other, the master development plan at Mayo.
He just did the Alvar House. That's the person, yes.
Correct. So there's so much more that he's doing, including whatever else we're going to talk about. So we contributed towards this. It's a 74 pavilion. That's what it's called. So life's kind of come full circle, hasn't it?
Indeed. So tell me something. How did it work? Because your father lived on campus. Did you have to go back home every evening, or did you live in the dorm?
Yeah, well, no, we had to go back home, but that was the minimum possible time away. So from early morning to late evening, we were like, completely a part of the curriculum. And only when we used to go back, sort of, the others went to a dorm or a room, and I went sort of to this little space at home, but only to sleep and then get up again and go with it. So yeah, I mean, I kind of enjoyed every positive aspect of school, and if I wasn't in the dorms with the other batchmates of mine, which of course, as one grew up, one spent more and more time in their rooms and their dorms than my own home. But because my father also left in 72, by the way. So, at the last couple of years, I had to spend at Mayo at various places. It's a long story. But yeah, I was very happy to be.
Which house were you?
I actually was in Colvin in junior or middle, as we called it. And because we all joined in Kashmir House as juniors. Colvin in middle and Bikaner and Tong, PT, in the seniors, which was a pretty kind of, strong and silent, tough house with black square and everything in terms of punishment drills, PDs.
I see.
But so I in many ways, I had the best of both worlds, or whatever. I mean, I would have, and of course, I stayed in boarding thereafter in college and so on and so forth. So I know I would have loved to be in boarding as well, which we kind of sort of quasi were.
No, the reason I asked was because, I would have asked you which is your favorite Mayo food story, but for the fact that you were eating, ghar ka khana every day, so that makes a difference.
No, beg your pardon. All meals were in the dining room, room or mess, as we call it. Yeah.
Okay. So which is your favorite Mayo food?
Well, it's a long time back, but I think I quite enjoyed the rajma chawal on one of the days, and then there was some kind of English food on Wednesday at night, and I quite enjoyed just, I was just so hungry all the time because of all the physical, sort of sporting work that one was doing. I just lapped everything up. All I know is that, the food was never enough. We were always scraping the bottom of every bowl, and every chapati was eaten. And of course, I was a vegetarian. So we at the end of these long tables in the senior mess and even the junior mess, which was called the Little Pareji Corner, which is a very distinctive Mayo name because it is a pidgin, sort of pigeonized word for parhezi, which is people who have certain, special requirements, which is what vegetarians were called that point of time. And we must be in only 10% or less. Yeah,
I did not realize.
So we were in the corner of the table, and we used to get special pareji food, which is only vegetable and dal and what have you. But so we certainly didn't partake the meats that were offered. But every meal was delightful, and of course, I must confess, you may not call it food, but there are a lot of stories. I think a lot of people will go with me because there was this stick jaw thing that was very specially made at Mayo in the mess, and I've never had the same again ever because it was dark brown with the peanut, of course, and treacly. I mean, you could pull it and then it's just lovely. Like, somebody get me a tissue, please. It was delicious. And of course, it was so-called the pudding, and it was a Saturday evening pudding. The Saturday evening meal was early because of the Saturday movie at the main pavilion. So all week long, I would trade various desserts, all the custards and all the rest of the mess, for collecting, as we called it in Hindi, nator or stick jaw, for getting a nice sort of 4 or 5 orders of it or portions of it, and then ball it all together, and the fingers were all a mess and things, and carry it to the pavilion and nibble on it while the movie was on. So that remains the most special food memory.
I can imagine what a memory this is. Recently we did this podcast where we asked all our alumni to share their food memories. And it's amazing, but Rajma Chawal across the road also remains the favorite food.
Oh, nice to hear
that.
By the way, this stick jaw, very often, I mean, it was illegal to carry food to the pavilion, right, for the movie. So we had to kind of shove it into our pockets. And imagine wearing white or gray trousers. And the stick jaw, which was kind of wettish, it wasn't exactly dry, had to be stuffed into the pockets and kind of pulled out surreptitiously and bitten into. So it used to carry a little bit of, the lynch and everything else.
Because the trousers
were ruined. But it was...
That's why I think the illegality
slightly illegal,
the extra flavor into it. Very nice. Oh, lovely. So then, how did Stickit happen?
Well, that's a very long story. I mean, I was, if I may say so, a little immodestly, I was reasonably good at cricket in Mayo as well. But one, I wasn't big and tall. And two, it was a minor sport for me in that I never made the Mayo 11 because I didn't spend enough time on it. And I remember the Venerable Mr. C.G. Joshi, who was our cricket coach and also the clay modeling chief. He's still alive, by the way, in Pune, and a wonderful man. But I don't think he particularly liked my unorthodox ways in cricket. So when I tested out, or in the nets and the senior nets as well, he was not delighted that I wasn't playing sort of, the old-fashioned sort of head down and defensive shots. So I remember that incident only too starkly, where I kind of was trying to hit him all over the place. And sure, I might have gotten caught here, then the other. I mean, it was only in the nets. But he said, no, this is not good. So next. I said, well, hang on, I'm hitting you all over the place. He was a very clever and celebrated leg spinner. And I don't think he appreciated the fact that I was jumping out and hitting him all over the place, small as I was. So I'm afraid I didn't make the Mayo team.
However, the Mayo 11.
Yeah. So personally speaking, though, and of course, there are two sides to my cricket. One, of course, the fact that I still, at this age, a little stupidly, many people think, I'm playing alumni cricket for Mayo. And as you may know, we take a team to Melbourne to play against Wesley College there, and we hope to have a student-teacher exchange as well. I play the alumni cricket quadrangular between Mayo, Doon, Delhi, and Scindia. And we just finished in December. We were runner-up. So I'm still playing, now a little less because my shoulder got injured and I can't bowl that much anyway. So a lot of my personal cricket picked up. And when I was in Calcutta with my corporate career from 80, 81, I played for the CCNFC, which was the first division club in Calcutta, which is where, people rise from. It was a little late to make it a career, but I kind of, enjoyed a lot of decent cricket after Mayo. That's one personal aspect of the game, but of course, a lot of people may actually remember me for talking about cricket, which was just a part of my broadcasting career because I was always multi-sport, having played all these sports and followed them and, followed closely. So the networks that I worked for said, well, would you mind doing this? And I said, yeah, sure. And they were like, I kind of, if I may say so myself, I've been a little immodest once in a while. They said, oh, well, yeah, that's good too. So will you carry on? And I did a lot of cricket because the networks in their early days, or the private networks when they came to our part of the world, were happy to discover that I was equally fond of that sport, and because I'd played a bit, there's some authenticity to the world of commentary and things. So not too many people were into commentary at that point of time when I started out in India. In fact, from 1982 with the Asian Games, which is another very long story, Pooja, and we can't possibly do this in a short podcast.
Quick version of it that... you were in a corporate career and suddenly you went into commentary with nothing. Did you do sports day commentary at Mayo? Did you do quizzes at Mayo? What brought this?
I think I was pretty strong and silent at Mayo. I wasn't sort of, I did a few debates and things, but no, I wasn't very sort of, loquacious at Mayo. I didn't speak too much. I was strong and silent. I think that's what most of Rajasthan is all about, strong and silent. But it just happened. I was in Calcutta in my corporate career, and there was only Doordarshan at that point of time, and they kind of advertised on their channels for former national sports, whatever, the champions and so on and so forth, to apply or audition for the Asian Games of 1982, which was a very big deal for India at that point of time. That's when color television came in and everything else. And long story short, I was sort of pushed into it by various friends who said, hey, listen, you are a past champion. By then, I suppose, because of my exposure to college in the US and what have you, maybe I had learned to speak a bit. So they said, well, why don't you apply? And I said, no, I don't really want to. But they pushed me into it, and I was sort of eventually very gladly pushed. And then I did the Asian Games, by which time I changed my corporate career. And I told a new company, VST, by the way, who really took extreme care of me, that, I'm happy to join because you want me to, but please know that in October I have to do the Asian Games. So will I be allowed to do it? And they said, well, Asian, wow, yeah, sure. We'll be all pleased and privileged in the company if you were to do it. In fact, we'll post you to Delhi. So then I had 10 years of doing a lot of Doordarshan work because that was the only channel at that point of time. So there I was, having done a lot of major national, international events. And then when private television came in 1992, I had left VST by then to pursue a career in sports. And bam, there I was with 10 years of experience. And I slid very smoothly into this first ever, by the way, professional sportscaster in India, because I'd given up everything else for doing work in the world of sport and, of course, commentary as well. So thereafter, life's been, very kind, and I've stayed in the world of sport.
Right place, right time, right skill.
I don't know about the skill, but I'll take right place, right time. And, of course, the right enthusiasm and maybe eventually skill too, yeah.
But tell me something, when I was reading up a bit about, your career today before our call, And I realized that you've had sort of as many ups and as downs, like when you talked about why the network, whether they didn't renew the contract or your short stint as the CEO of the IPL team. But there's this sense of fortitude that comes across because I loved your thinking at that point in time. You said, I worked very hard and I was just the steam, I became part of the steam that was sort of to be taken off. So did Mayo help you develop this sense of fortitude?
Well, thank you for saying so. It probably did, but also you reminded me about two terrible,
Sorry.
well, specific incidences of my life. But yeah, I mean, I suppose everybody has reversals, don't they? I mean, everybody goes through a little bit of up and down.
But it's how you take them.
True,
That's what
true,
struck me as unique about your answers at that point in time.
Well, thank you. But I mean, I do think, generally speaking, people who are in the world of sport, more than many other worlds, learn very quickly that you lose much more than you win. I'm not saying fail. You lose much more than you win. And if you don't have the ability to get up and dust yourself and get on with it again, then what kind of a sports person are you anyway? So, yeah, I mean, so Mayo and sport, and that combination was certainly very important to my life, and which is why I give so much time to Mayo, because I'm very, I recognize the fact that my early years at Mayo have a great bearing on shaping me for the rest of my life in many, many areas, not just because of sport and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I also may have kind of survived all of that with some equanimity, because I'm also, if I say so myself, very unambitious. So whatever came my way, I was very happy to take. And when it went away, I said, well, fair enough. That's okay. If somebody wants to take it, is there? I mean, I was not running the network and neither was I owning the team. So people have their prerogative to take these decisions. And surely there's more space for me in this world. And so far, so good. I've been very, 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 very fortunate all my life.
How can you say you're not ambitious? I read that in one of your interviews too. For somebody who's achieved so much, I mean, you can't do that if you're not ambitious.
Well, I don't know about achieve, but whatever I've done is just because it came to me. And was I going after it? No, not ever. And to me, if I'm not, running after something and desperately seeking something and grasping something, to me, that's the opposite of being ambitious. I'm most laid back. I've just been, I say again, very fortunate that things keep coming and maybe just enough so that there's a little bit of food on the table always. But I remember one quote here. I'm not much for quotes, by the way. I remember this quote because it suits me and my personality. And as you may know, this bird of paradise is this mythical, beautiful, fabulous creature, which is rare. And the quote goes, "The bird of paradise lands on the hand that does not grasp."
I see.
So I'm quite happy at that quote. Yeah. So, I've been very fortunate, maybe because I haven't grasped, I haven't reached out, I haven't kind of wanted. And so whatever's come has been has brought me happiness. There are many, by the way, Pooja, who always remind me, hey, listen, you with your whatever skills and, opportunities and so on and so forth, have really disappointed us because you've done 1/10 of what you could have gone on to do. And I said, well, fair enough here. But I mean, I'm really very happy to have done the 10% that you think I would have done much more of, or 90% more of. But I really wasn't pushing ever anyway. And I say that with humility because even now, although I should really be sort of more than semi-retired, if I need to reach out to someone and say, hey, listen, I mean, is there any assignment going or whatever? If I have to do that, I know I will, because I don't think that there's any shame. So it's not because of ego that I haven't reached out.
So after last year, you can't say that, huh? That you had to reach out. I read that whole story of the IPL auction.
Well, even there, Pooja, what was I doing? I was just sitting at home.
I know.
If that IPL auction bird of paradise came and landed on my hand, what can I say? I mean, I say, yeah, sure, let's do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I don't know about you, but I'm glad that I reached my hand out and grasped at this opportunity to talk to you. Ambitious or no ambitious.
No, thank you, Pooja. That's very kind of you. And I know that the podcast has a very limited amount of time, and we really should keep it focused on Mayo, not so much on me. But I think I've been very fortunate, and I recognize I'm repeating myself that Mayo had a lot to do with what happened to the rest of my life.
I'm so glad to hear that.
I would like to add, Pooja, that, I may sound a little Mayo obsessed, but I hope that there are many others who are equally enthusiastic and acknowledge their time at Mayo to be of great help in starting many careers, because sometimes you tend to acknowledge institutions after school. And yes, I mean, that's obviously very relevant. You might acknowledge, say, a major college or a technical, IIT or whatever. But I do think that the grounding that people receive is what eventually allows them to succeed if they wish to. Nobody has to, sort of go deep into a career. So, because I'm very aware that success means very different things to different people. So it's not just achievement what's the measure of success anyway. So that's a very different kind of topic, and I don't want to discuss that here. But let's go back to, I do hope that more alumni recognize what Mayo did for them, and therefore meet more often, particularly after a certain age, because time sort of starts running out on you when you're going downhill, and that our gatherings are more frequent and more heavily attended. So I'm a little greedy there, and I want to go back and meet, all the people from my batch particularly. I mean, even fond of going back to Mayo and meeting even the youngsters who are still in school, because it just gives you a sense of how things are continuing. So yes, and also in terms of perhaps giving back to school, not just acknowledging the fact that school did so much for you, but those who have had the good fortune to do really well materially, if they can give back to school in any which way, I think that's how we have to take Mayo forward, because we can't possibly keep living, I say we as in Mayo, the administration, on the fee and keep enhancing the fee, because there has to be more give back by those who've done well in their lives to Mayo, to set up various scholarships or departments or buildings or whatever else that Mayo needs. And in that area, I suppose Mayo also has to ensure that they up the level of confidence to people who do wish to set up an endowment, so that that whole connection becomes stronger and stronger as we go along, because Mayo certainly could use its alumni giving back. Otherwise, who else? I mean, the alumni should be the number one. First, the alumni to give back, and only then others.
So I really hope that inspires, because, I see a lot of difference between, at least the boys engage a lot more alumni with the school. But on the girls' side, we are still struggling, like to get attendance at events. So even for the girls to engage. And I guess we can't, I mean, it's early days for us, because I am the first batch. So we are still, 45, 46 years old, and just about letting our kids go out of home. So this is the first time you've actually sort of looked up and said, okay, there is a life.
Well, Pooja, you make a good point, of course. And I was about to say that too, that, you have to be a little more patient, because, I mean, when the numbers grow for the women's alumni, I think you will start getting more acknowledgement, more gathering, and perhaps even more give back to school. And do remember that women, unlike the boys, get pulled into so many areas. There's so much multitasking, and one tends to. I mean, I think that women alumni groups, especially in terms of school or perhaps even college, are take so much more to get that organized, because you people move into so many other directions, and sometimes there are these pesky husbands who don't seem to be too friendly in terms of the women going back into alumni situations. So I think it's much tougher for the women, and I would be far more patient when it comes to women giving back to Mayo. It'll just take a little more time, Pooja. I think you have a large number already, and I'm sure that most of the girls who leave Mayo have very fond memories, but they get pulled into different directions. And once the alumni gatherings gather steam, which I'm sure they will because of you and then others that surround you, then more and more talk will develop into more and more acknowledgement of what Mayo was and all the memories. And perhaps, especially professional women, if I can use that term, I'm sure eventually we'll start giving back to Mayo girls as well. So there's hope yet. For sure.
There is. In fact, this is a great point too. I mean, this is amazing what your brothers and you are doing. I happen to see the building, the new NC Sharma block that's coming up in Mayo College. You want to tell us a bit about it? What brought that thought? How did the whole project come together?
Well, yeah. Well, thank you for noticing and bringing it up, although it's a little embarrassing. But Well, it was just a question of my father, who was so completely Mayo obsessed, even though he went as a principal to another school and then, was involved with a few other institutions. But his life, again, really began at Mayo, in terms of his professional life. And he was extremely fond of everything he did at Mayo. He was, 100% drowned, steeped into everything that he did at Mayo. And some of that rubbed down off to us as well. So as brothers, got together because there was a minor windfall at some point or the other, and we said, well, we don't have to change our lifestyle, but can we kind of acknowledge the fact that all of us have done what we've done, or were given the opportunity because our father was so at Mayo and so fond of it, and many old Mayo students, if I can speak for them, are very fond of their connection with my father. So let's do that, because school needs many projects, and I've just mentioned that people need to give back. And Abhimanyu Dalal, our batchmate, was in charge of the master plan. So I got in touch with him and said, what can we do for whatever amount we'd set aside? And he said, well, there are many projects, but perhaps this one can fit in. And I wasn't too concerned about what exactly, or something in the mathematics department, or this, that, and the other. I just said, well, what does Mayo need at this point of time that can fit into our budget? And he said, well, why don't you pick this? And I said, that's fine too, because Mayo does not have a sort of a single batch lecture hall, for in terms of whatever it could be used for. So these were supposed to be a couple of lecture halls. It's become a slightly bigger project now because there is a big basement as well. So it's become a large space for topic-specific gatherings, which was hitherto not available at Mayo. And hopefully it'll be very well used when it comes up. It's taken a long time because Abhimanyu is very finicky, and why not? Because, he's very concerned about maintaining the heritage of Mayo, and at times the stone wasn't available, and whatever other problems were faced, or setbacks. But hopefully it'll be inaugurated sometime in 2023, and we're looking forward to inviting just everybody who knew him or even didn't to just come and celebrate something new happening at Mayo. But the most important thing, Pooja, is that once it all goes well, and I'm sure it will, I hope it becomes a precursor, something that can lead many others to also contribute to Mayo in either an individual specific capacity or a collective capacity, to make more things happen at Mayo that are required, because as we know, many things are. So that really is the hope, that people will see something come up. And of course, there's a Kangra amphitheater as well, which had its own share of problems. But I just hope to inspire many others, because surely there are so many other Mayo students who are much, I don't want to speak for them because we don't know internally, but I think are in a much better position to contribute to something major at Mayo. It's just waiting to happen, and I hope the floodgates open soon.
I hope so too. I mean, totally, and especially on the other side of the road, I would request the boys that please remember your mother's played an equal role in bringing you up. So think of the girls' school when it comes to what you want to do for Mayo. But I think the building's coming up.
But you make an important point about. Well, I hope so too. But you make an important point about mothers, because my wife, particularly, who was in fact one of the biggest, she was one who inspired and motivated me to do this. So I owe that to her for sure. And let me put it on record. And she says, why NC Sharma? What about Mrs. Sharma, your mother? I said, oh yeah, well, maybe one of the halls can actually be named after her, and the main hall after my father, whatever. So we'll see how that goes. But you make an important point. Mothers forever.
So do you have kids?
I have 2 boys, yeah.
You have 2 boys. You didn't think of sending them to Mayo? Or did they go to Mayo?
I was obsessed. I was very, very deeply interested in sending them to Mayo, but we shifted to Bangalore at that point of time. And I think my wife, who is the boss, what can I say? She heard a few stories of people at Mayo at that point of time. This is like the mid-90s. And she wasn't, particularly pleased to let them get out of her circle of love and care. So I didn't want to be, too harsh on this and too insistent. So I kind of bowed down, and they studied in Bangalore and elsewhere and wherever they went. But unfortunately, they didn't go to Mayo. And I might have minor regret personally, but who knows with these things? I mean, it's all destiny, really. But yeah, I was certainly personally, I was a little disappointed. But so be it. Maybe they were plowed, and maybe not. Who knows? But they didn't go to Mayo, sadly. But they're 34 and 31, but they haven't married yet. So I'm wondering whether I'll be around to try and influence their children to go to Mayo. Who knows? We'll see.
Maybe you should take them to the next Masi party, and they can find a Mayo girl to get married to. that brings Mayo back straight into your household.
Well, I just took them to Mayo for the Deja Vu this year in December, and they were, I think their eyes were sparkling. I was like, wow, okay, is this what it's all about? It's too late for them to be educated there. But you're right. I think we should just expose them a little more, quietly to Mayo Girls gatherings, and who knows.
Absolutely. But what a wonderful, chat. And thank you so much for this, Charu. I really enjoyed the conversation. In fact, I feel very happy that I finally made the effort of going for the Mayo Boys prize giving and landed up meeting so many of you. Vikram was there. We had a lovely chat over a podcast, and yours has been due, of course. And I'm glad I finally caught you, and we've got this chat on for the podcast. So thank you so much.
You're most welcome. Thank you for thinking of me, or calling me, and for this chat. I enjoyed it too. Like I said, we can be talking for hours when it comes to Mayo, but I know you are all sorts of time limits, and we can cover maybe 2 out of the 800 things that people wanted to. But thank you so much again, and I enjoyed the chat, and I hope people who listen will just be inspired to think of Mayo in a more friendly, enthusiastic fashion.
Yeah, I hope so too. I mean, you've got so many people who are applying to Mayo still, so that's good news for both the schools. There's waiting lists, and there's admissions are still, quite sought after. So that's
well, I'm really happy to hear that. Really happy to hear that, because I mean, the school deserves a lot of attention from various parents if they want their children to grow up to be fine citizens who can adapt to any situation, who can utilize just the phenomenal number of opportunities that Mayo boys and girls, I'm sure increasingly so, offer, which city schools and the new schools cannot. Does Mayo have to change a little more and kind of become even more contemporary? Perhaps. But there's, I think, a fair amount of work being done to understand and to adapt in terms of keeping all the history and the tradition and the heritage, and yet being as contemporary as is possible.
That's true. In fact, I always, when I looked at Mayo, I felt that we were more IB before IB became a word, because you look at the all-roundedness of the education, and you look at all the stuff that the Mayo boys were taught. I was looking at all the glass and the carpentry and the music. Like you yourself said, you played every sport. There was academics. You played the sitar. I mean, in a city, you'd only be going from one class to the other, stuck in traffic jams, to be able to do that many activities in a day.
Well, you make a good point. I think Mayo was always IB. Just because it doesn't have a stamp doesn't mean it's not IB, because it does offer you a really fabulous experience, and people can grow up taking anything, as their forte. So but there's a big movement on now, Pooja, as you know, just to be able to make sure that Mayo adopts even better practices, so that it becomes even more sustainable, because there's a bit of a challenge right now. But I'm sure we'll find a path that's acceptable to all, and there's a lot of effort being put in that direction. So, maybe there are better times ahead. I certainly hope so.
I would hope so too. So go Mayo.
Go Mayo. All right, Pooja. Thanks so much. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening ahead.
Okay.
This podcast is brought to you by Mayo Girls Alumni Association. If you're a Mayoite and wish to participate, email us on mayocollegegirlsalumni@gmail.com.